Welcome to the history section. Today we're looking at a truly transformative period in Japan, the Age of War, and specifically how that long struggle for local power eventually led to a push for national hegemony, a process that would, in the end, completely redefine the samurai class.
Yes, and the context here is just relentless pressure. During the Age of War, the Sengoku daimyo, these local warlords, were caught in a constant, brutal cycle of competition.
Expand or be absorbed.
That's it, exactly. They first had to achieve total consolidation within their own territories. Only then could they even think about the bigger picture, the larger conflicts aimed at the capital in Kyoto.
So we see this necessary shift in ambition. It's no longer just about taking the next province.
Right.
The great Sengoku daimyo realized the ultimate prize was control over the entire country. Takeda Shingen is a figure that comes up again and again as a perfect example of this.
He is. He had both the sophisticated administrative skills needed to actually govern large territories and, of course, the military genius to conquer them in the first place.
He wasn't just a general. He was an incipient state builder.
Absolutely. But there was a profound strategic problem, a kind of impediment to achieving that goal.
The rear flank.
The rear flank.
Yeah.
Any major move toward Kyoto, which was the symbolic center of all imperial legitimacy, it just created this critical, often fatal vulnerability.
A rival could just sweep in from behind.
Precisely. A local rival or even coalition of smaller lords could seize your home territory while your main army was hundreds of miles away.
Which created a sort of political inertia, didn't it? This need to secure your base meant that unification was just delayed for decades.
The focus had to be on solidifying local control until your home base was completely unassailable. And this period of intense, large-scale warfare, running from about the 1530s to the 1560s, it really acted as a crucible.
A crucible that resulted in a complete metamorphosis of the ruling class.
It did. The research shows that very few of the original Sengoku daimyo actually survived this period of attrition.
And the ones who emerged, they weren't just bigger versions of what came before.
No, not at all. They were large-scale warlords with vastly superior capacities for centralized civil and military organization. These are the figures we call the shoku daimyo.
And that term, shoku daimyo, it represents a functional change, a structural one.
It does. These are the lords who successfully transitioned into the Tokugawa period, many of whom retained their status right up until the Meiji Restoration in 1869.
The Shimazu of Satsuma are a perfect illustration of this path, aren't they?
They are. They evolved from Shugo daimyo, the old provincial military governors, to independent Sengoku daimyo, and then reached the peak of their power as Shoku daimyo.
They conquered all of Kyushu Island.
The entirety of it. And their success wasn't just about winning battles. It involved bureaucratic innovation, administrative centralization. Things the older, more decentralized Sengoku model simply couldn't sustain on that kind of scale.
And this success, which was fundamentally rooted in military power, it created a dependency that changed the warrior class forever.
It had to. The sheer scale of these new professional armies demanded a much more military-centric organization of the samurai. It was totally distinct from the previous lord-vassal relationship.
Which was based on things like kinship or land ownership.
Exactly. Old ties. The new system was about command structure. It was about a salary.
It was a necessary cost. Once you have 10 or 20,000 men under arms, you just can't rely on a feudal system where allegiance is tied to a small, hereditary plot of land.
That old system was too slow. It was too decentralized and far too prone to internal fracture.
Which brings us to this core idea of professionalization. This shift to state-level warfare, it demanded the physical separation of the warrior from the land. This is the bedrock of the entire Shokuho revolution.
Yes, and that separation was absolutely paramount for both domain control and for military efficiency.
How so?
Well, think about it. If a samurai gets his livelihood and his identity from a distant piece of land, his loyalty might be split. Is it to his local community or to the distant lord in the central castle?
And his availability for a long campaign is compromised by planting seasons, by harvests.
Precisely. So by separating him from the land, by moving him into the castle town, the daimyo ensures total military and civil control. His entire financial existence now depends on the salary paid by his lord.
Oda Nobunaga's key achievement was really formalizing this strict division of labor.
It was. And we see it mirrored in the domains of smaller successful daimyo as well, like Ukita Hide,
professional samurai who do nothing but fight and administer, and farmers who do nothing but till the land.
And this complete division was critical for the new scale of operations. I mean, earlier figures like Takeda Shingen, they'd experimented with balancing the military and agricultural use of his forces.
Particularly the Ashigaru, the foot soldier.
Right, but the immense size of the new domains under the Shokuga daimyo, it both permitted and absolutely required this full specialization. You simply can't manage a multi-province campaign if half your army has to go home to plant rice.
Speaking of the Ashigaru, there's some fascinating material on the practical reality of these soldiers on campaign. It really strips away any romanticism.
It does. We read about Ashigaru tying rice bags around their torsos for makeshift protection.
Using the very supplies they were carrying as armor.
It's pure pragmatism. It speaks to a very different kind of fighting man. We also see evidence of them using their helmets as makeshift water buckets for their horses.
These were disciplined, professional soldiers. They were often the first to be equipped with the new harquebuses, and they formed the backbone of these huge new armies. Expendable, but absolutely vital.
In this whole process of professionalization and centralization, it manifested physically in one overwhelming way.
The rise of the castle town, the Jokamachi.
Exactly. This structure became the major physical, military, and economic center of the domain. It completely replaced the old, decentralized mountain fortresses that the earlier Sengoku daimyo favored.
The location itself is telling. Mountain fortresses are purely defensive, isolating.
Whereas the new castles were deliberately built on major trade routes. They were designed to be economic hubs, for collecting taxes, for trade, and they had to be massive, designed to house the daimyo's entire professional standing army, their families, everything.
In the architecture itself, it's a direct response to gunpowder.
A direct response. You see these colossal stone walls, these wide open baileys, all specifically designed to protect the garrison from harquebus and cannon fire, a world away from the old earth and timber defenses.
What's surprising is the speed of this change.
It's astonishing. History tells us that the 30 years between 1580 and 1610 were this period of just intense, almost frenetic urban construction all across Japan.
So it wasn't a gradual trend. It was a sudden, almost universal adoption of a superior model.
It was. Many of the most iconic castles we know today, Himeji, Hikone, Okayama, Edo, the Matsuosaka Castle, they were all built by these Shokuga daimyo in that single generation. It shows how quickly the successful rulers realized that centralized control was the only way to survive.
To really understand the system, it helps to zoom in on a single domain. And the case of Ukita Hidei in Bizen province is a perfect example of this evolution from local chaos to centralized control.
It is. By the 1540s, Bizen was the definition of fragmented. It was split mainly between two clans, the Urakami and the Matsuda.
And when you say fragmented?
I mean, to give you a sense of the scale, the Urakami domain alone consisted of 172 separate fiefs. These were held by 59 major vassals. Allegiance with this complex web of individual pledges, kinship ties. Many vassals had even married into the Urakami family.
And 200 separate castles in one province.
100. All occupied by vassals of these two rival houses. It was a recipe for constant internal conflict.
And into this mess steps Ukita Hideo, who starts as an incredibly minor figure.
Incredibly minor. In 1545, he's commanding a small fortress and just 30 men under the Urakami. But what's critical, right from the start, is the relationship between Ukita and his 30 men. It was fundamentally modern.
How so? Different from the traditional Urakami-Ukita vassalage.
Completely different. Ukita's men were not landowning vassals. They were professional soldiers under his personal command. They were entirely dependent on him economically, paid directly from the proceeds of his tiny fief.
So it's a salaried army corps, in essence?
That's what it is. It established immediate military and economic dependency on him, completely bypassing the traditional land-based loyalty structure.
And as Ukita's domain expands, as he conquers more territory for the Urakami, he has to start appointing senior samurai as keepers of these new castles.
Right, which necessitates a return to some form of the traditional lord-vassal tie. You need territorial command. But Ukita was meticulous about mitigating the risk of fragmentation. He had seen how it almost destroyed the Urakami.
So what did he do? What were his risk mitigation strategies?
They were quite advanced, almost proto-bureaucratic. He frequently rotated commands among his senior vassals to make sure no one developed too deep a local bond.
He also periodically recalled them to his main castle.
For long periods of time, forcing them to live under his direct supervision. But most importantly, he always kept the largest, most effective part of his army under his own direct control, based permanently in a central castle.
His personal guarantee of internal security.
Precisely. And this careful, calculated organization allowed him to grow exponentially. By 1573, the fiefs Ukita controlled amounted to a tenth of Bizen province.
Fielding a force of 10 to 15,000 men.
Yes. And he grew stronger by exploiting the dangerous freedom the Urakami allowed their own vassals, who were foolishly making alliances with outside powers.
Ukita used this as a justification for his own actions.
He did. He systematically destroyed other Urakami vassals who challenged him. He defeated the rival Matsuda house, and then he waited for his moment.
A succession dispute within the Urakami family.
Exactly. He turned against his former masters, eliminated them, and seized the entire province. That is how a minor lord with 30 men became a major shakuho daimyo.
And his first actions as ruler of the province show that professionalism. He rules from his new capital, Okayama Castletown, and he personally controls lands valued at 400,000 koku.
We should probably define koku here. It was the standard economic measure representing the amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year.
So 400,000 koku is a massive, centralized base of wealth.
The foundation of his power. And his first act as a major lord was to conduct a systematic land survey of the entire province.
Which wasn't just about drawing lines on a map.
Not at all. It was an act of state building. It was about clarifying fief boundaries and, crucially, ensuring that previously hidden or unregistered fields were identified and properly taxed.
The ability to tax your territory accurately is the mark of a successful state.
It is. But of course he had to defend this new territory. So he granted lands to subsidiary lords to guard the borders, fiefs of about 10,000 koku.
But this is where his risk mitigation becomes institutionalized. He grants them land, but he doesn't want another Urakami-style fragmentation.
So he implements a radical centralizing system, a residential requirement.
He makes them live in the capital.
That's right. These 10,000 koku samurai were required to reside permanently in Okayama. They had to leave their castle armies in the care of subordinates who had minimal kinship or local ties to the area.
Preventing them from building up independent regional power bases.
Exactly. And on top of that, Ukita always kept personal control of a quarter of the total domain lands and the largest army. He made sure he could always afford to buy loyalty, always outspending any potential rival within his own domain. It's the perfect demonstration of the evolution from localized fealty to centralized, salaried military dependency.
So the stage is set. We have professional soldiers organized on military lines, concentrated in castle towns. The old lord-vassal oath still exists, but now it's more of a mechanism for absorbing large domains into a central state.
And this new meritocratic, centralized military machine, it allowed for the incredible rise of figures like Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
It's staggering to remember his origins, the son of a peasant woodcutter.
He runs away from a monastery and joins Nobunaga as a common ashigaru in 1558.
And Nobunaga, who was famously pragmatic, famously had an eye for talent regardless of a person's birth. He spots Hideyoshi's capacity immediately.
He does. Hideyoshi rises with astonishing speed. By the time of the critical Battle of Okehazama, where Nobunaga crushes the Imagawa clan, Hideyoshi is already in a position of some responsibility.
And that victory opens the path to the capital for Nobunaga.
His subsequent march on Kyoto, which was enabled by his alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, was all about legitimacy.
Even symbolic legitimacy.
Especially symbolic. Even though the Ashikaga shogun had no real power at this point, the office itself held historical and religious legitimacy granted by the emperor. That stamp of approval was critical for unifying all these disparate daimyo.
You see other powerful daimyo doing the same thing. Osugi Kenshin goes to Kyoto in 1558 just to be invested with the title of Kanto Kanrei, which was politically meaningless by then.
And Ukita Hide sought legal authority from the Mori after taking Bizen. Nobunaga needed this centralized authority to finalize his claim as the preeminent power.
So after securing his rear, partly by marrying his daughter to Takeda Shingen's son, Nobunaga enters Kyoto on November 9, 1568.
And he brings Ashikaga Yoshiaki with him, who was then installed as the 15th and final Ashikaga shogun.
But his entry wasn't just a political change. It ended the celebrated self-government that the Mashi, the wealthy townsmen and merchant guilds, had established in Kyoto after the Onin War.
Nobunaga crushed that autonomy immediately, placing the city under his direct military and fiscal control.
Unsurprisingly, tensions with the new shogun, Yoshiaki, escalated very quickly.
In 1573, Nobunaga submitted 17 articles detailing sweeping reforms for the shogun's administration, which was a profound humiliation for Yoshiaki. It seized all effective power.
So Yoshiaki responds by plotting with Takeda Shingen to get rid of Nobunaga.
But Nobunaga was warned of the plot. He acted decisively. He seized Yoshiaki, imprisoned him in a distant castle, and in 1573, the Ashikaga shogunate just ends ignominiously.
And Nobunaga couldn't take the title of shogun himself because he lacked the required Minamoto clan lineage.
But by eliminating the shogun, he eliminated the need for that kind of legitimacy. He was asserting that his power came from military might alone.
After this, he accelerates his campaigns, reaching his military peak at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575.
And the timing here was critical. Nobunaga was immensely relieved when Takeda Shingen died in 1573 after being hit by a bullet during a siege. His son, Katsuyori, inherited the army, but not his father's strategic genius.
The confrontation comes when Katsuyori lays siege to Nagashino Castle in Ieyasu's territory.
Right, and we have that incredible story of the samurai Tori Sunimon who slips out to get help, is captured by the Takeda and then crucified opposite the castle walls as a warning.
But a Takeda samurai was so impressed by his bravery that he commissioned a war banner depicting the crucifixion.
It's that strange mix of utter ruthlessness and profound warrior honor that defined the age. Nobunaga saw this as his chance to destroy the Takeda for good.
He personally leads 30,000 troops, joined by Ieyasu's 8,000, against Katsuyori's 15,000.
And Katsuyori, overconfident in his cavalry, chooses to fight.
Nobunaga's choice of ground was masterful. He took a strong defensive position behind a palisade with broken ground in front and a stream separating him from the Takeda. It was designed to break a cavalry charge.
But the defining factor was firepower. From his huge contingent of harquebus, Nobunaga chose the 3,000 best shots and lined them up in 3 ranks behind the palisade.
This gives the Ashikaga this incredibly prominent, coordinated role.
It does, and as the Takeda cavalry charged, they were just cut down by coordinated volleys of harquebus fire.
Some accounts suggest he may have even used ordered firing by rank 1 group firing while the others reloaded, creating a continuous stream of fire.
Which, if true, would have put him a century ahead of most armies in the world. Nagashino was decisive. It was proof that organized, professional infantry firepower completely trumped the traditional mounted samurai charge.
The new military system had won.
And the year after, in 1576, Nobunaga builds Azuchi Castle. It's a physical symbol of this new, supreme power.
It was unique. Not just a command post for a region like Okayama, but designed to control the entire country. It was as much a palace as a fortress.
Built outside Kyoto, on a huge promontory jutting into Lake Biwa. Its 7-story keep was unprecedented. It gave its name to the cultural flowering that followed the Azuchi Momoyama period.
By 1577, Nobunaga commands central Japan. He entrusts the campaign to subdue the west to Hideyoshi.
It's a protracted campaign, and in 1582, Hideyoshi requests reinforcements.
And while resting with just a small force of 300 samurai at the Hanaji Temple in Kyoto, Nobunaga is attacked and killed by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide.
At the time of his death, Nobunaga controlled about a third of Japan. The vacuum was instantaneous, and it was dangerous.
Nobunaga's assassination created an immediate crisis, and really only 2 people had the shokuho capacity to inherit his domain, Hideyoshi and Ieyasu.
And Hideyoshi acted with ruthless efficiency. He immediately makes peace with the Mori, returns to Kyoto, and defeats Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki just 13 days later.
Positioning himself as Nobunaga's avenger.
And his legitimate successor. He secures his position on the Succession Council, which decides Nobunaga's infant grandson should be the heir, a decision that effectively handed all control directly to Hideyoshi.
He continues the unification process, but with a critical difference in political strategy.
Liberality toward defeated enemies. He recognized that the lord-vassal bond was dangerously fragile. Akechi Mitsuhide's treachery was fresh, painful proof of that.
So his policy was this strategy of gratitude. He aimed to make gratitude the basis for loyalty. That sounds almost naive.
It was and it wasn't. It was a form of sophisticated public relations, but it was backed by the threat of overwhelming force. His professional army was the largest and best organized in Japan.
So the offer was clemency and status retention?
Accept my terms, or face the fate of the Takeda at Nagashino. It was a rational choice he was offering them.
And this strategy was immediately tested by the only other real power left in central Japan, Tokugawa Ieyasu.
By 1584, Ieyasu controlled 5 rich provinces. He was a major force.
The resulting standoff near Kamaki is fascinating. Neither leader was willing to risk a frontal assault. They'd learned the lessons of Nagashino.
Both took strong defensive positions, building earthworks and palisades. The potential for concentrated harquebus fire made any kind of massed assault suicidal.
It was like World War I trench warfare, a stalemate.
It was. Eventually, there was a small pitched battle at Nagakute, which Hideyoshi's troops actually lost, but the overall stalemate led to a negotiated understanding. Ieyasu pledged allegiance to Hideyoshi.
Strategically anticipating that Hideyoshi, being older and lacking an adult heir, would eventually have succession problems.
A very shrewd move. With Ieyasu neutralized, Hideyoshi builds the colossal Osaka castle as his base. Its outer walls were 9 miles in circumference.
An undeniable statement of authority.
He also completes Nobunaga's subjugation of the warrior monks, the Ikoiki, ending that conflict for good.
And his unification campaigns continued. In 1585, he conquered Shikoku Island, which was controlled by Chosokabe Motochika.
And Motochika's military was a throwback. It was built on part-time samurai farmers, the Ichiro Gosoku.
1 fief and 1 suit of armor.
Yes. For a poorer daimyo like Chosokabe, it was an economic necessity. And these rustic samurai were famously brave. There's an anecdote that they'd stick their spears in the ridges of the rice paddies while they worked, ready to fight at a moment's notice.
But that system, however brave, was obsolete against Hideyoshi's professional army.
They were defeated. And when Chosokabe tried to convert them into a professional salaried army based in his new castle, he struggled. They didn't want to give up their ancestral lands.
It shows the social friction this military revolution caused.
Then came his largest campaign, Kyushu, in 1587, against the Shimazu of Satsuma. The Shimazu leadership responded to Hideyoshi's order to withdraw with indignation,
Contrasting their long-established rule with Hideyoshi's humble peasant origins.
They rejected his authority completely. So Hideyoshi mustered a colossal army of 200,000 men.
But the campaign was difficult. The Shimazu knew the terrain. The army got bogged down in the rainy season.
Logistical nightmare. Morale was low. Hideyoshi even had an escape plan ready. In the end, the Shimazu capitulated just 5 days before Hideyoshi's own withdrawal deadline.
The final military campaign of unification was against the Hojo, rulers of the Kanto region based in Odawara Castle.
The Hojo recalled most of their samurai to the central stronghold, which left their outlying castles vulnerable. Hideyoshi destroyed their power structure and then settled in for a long siege of Odawara.
And this siege was a masterpiece of psychological warfare.
It was. He was determined to avoid the hardships of Kyushu. He ensured the besieging army was well supplied and lavishly entertained. He brought part of his court to the siege camp.
Prostitutes, musicians, sumo wrestlers. Samurai brought their wives and grew vegetable gardens.
He turned a military siege into a giant, months-long, well-fed party. He famously wrote that he had shut the Hojo up like a bird in a birdcage. Seeing this permanent, prosperous city outside their walls, the Hojo just lost the will to fight.
And they surrendered. With that, the unification was complete.
Unable to become shogun, Hideyoshi ruled as regent. And his domestic policy was aimed at political stability and, crucially, at ensuring no peasant could ever follow his path to power again.
He did this by formally separating the classes with the Sword Hunt Edict of 1588.
Yes, mandating the collection of all weapons, swords, spears, harquebuses from all non-samurai.
The public justification was that it would reduce unrest and help agriculture.
And that the weapons would be melted down to build a giant Buddha statue, lending it a spiritual purpose. But the real goal was to end the threat of large-scale peasant uprisings, the Ikki.
And the result was the creation of a clear social hierarchy for the next 2.5 centuries. From then on, wearing 2 swords became the exclusive badge of the samurai class. The line was drawn.
Hideyoshi's later years, though, they saw a real decline in his health and behavior. It was coupled with a growing megalomania,
which led to his disastrous foreign wars.
The invasions of Korea. In 1592, he launched the first one, with an eventual plan to attack China. The invasion was undermined from the start by intense rivalries among his own commanders.
And then the superior Korean Navy, under Admiral Yi Sun-sin, started cutting their supply lines.
Exactly. A Chinese counterattack pushed the Japanese back to garrisons in southern Korea. A second invasion in 1597 was even less successful.
And the war only ended when Hideyoshi died in 1598, prompting an immediate recall of all troops.
Despite those failures, like Nobunaga, he was a monumental patron of the Azuchi Momoyama culture. His architectural projects were grand, though many no longer survive.
Known for a flamboyant taste, a lavish use of gold, the pure gold tea room in Osaka Castle.
Yes, but also for supporting incredible art, like the painted screens of the Kano School. He loved grand public spectacles, huge flower viewing parties, massive tea ceremonies.
His death in 1598 created another dangerous power vacuum. His son and heir, Hideyori, was only 5 years old.
Hideyoshi appointed a board of 5 regents, but it was quickly dominated by the single strongest figure who had been patiently waiting in the wings, Tokugawa Ieyasu.
The confrontation was inevitable. In 1600, Ishida Mitsunari, a key retainer of Hideyoshi's house, formed a coalition against Ieyasu.
Their plan was sound, a diversionary revolt by the Uesugi in the north to draw Ieyasu away from the critical Osaka-Kyoto region.
But Ieyasu's response showed his cunning. He headed north, calmly allowing the Ishida faction to seize Osaka.
It was a gamble. It relied on his northern allies being able to check the Uesugi, and on the fact that by moving toward his own territory near Edo, he could organize a huge army without arousing suspicion.
The critical factor was control of the main roads to Kyoto. Ieyasu returned in force, aiming to seize the castles guarding those roads.
And that drew Ishida out of the mighty Osaka stronghold, forcing a pitched battle.
Ishida overextended his advance and was forced to withdraw to the hills around the village of Sekigahara. The night before the battle, there was high wind and driving rain.
The next morning, a thick fog. When it lifted around 8 o'clock, 2 enormous samurai armies faced each other for what would be the largest battle ever fought between them.
It became a huge, muddy melee, but the decisive shift came through treachery.
The Kobayakawa samurai, who were holding Ishida's crucial right flank, had been persuaded by Ieyasu's agents. They entered the fray on the side of the Tokugawa.
And that was it. Ishida's troops broke, and the Tokugawa professionals won the day. The unified country conquered by Hideyoshi now belonged to Ieyasu.
And the surviving castles from this era, they really represent the final, most perfect phase of medieval fortress building. They are enduring monuments to the centralized power of the shokuho system.
There was a profound evolution. 14th century castles were simple wooden stockades. Defenses grew stronger with stone, with better site selection.
But by the late 16th century, the castle and its town were the economic and political heart of the domain. They replaced the old mountain fortresses, they were built on trade routes, and they were massive enough to hold the entire samurai army.
The central keep was often raised on a massive earth mound, faced with huge stone blocks fitted together without mortar, an engineering marvel.
And those sloping stone foundations were a key defensive feature. They looked scalable, but they were defended by trapdoors for dropping rocks or pouring boiling water on attackers.
The wooden buildings on top were architecturally grand. Sweeping eaves, tiled roofs, bronze ornamentation, pure white or somber black.
Castles like Himeji served a dual purpose. They were meant to deter attackers as much by the sheer ostentation of the owner's wealth as by their actual impregnability.
But military necessity was never forgotten. Inside, you'd find rack upon rack for spears and guns and storage space for months of supplies, ensuring the domain's central core was always ready for a fight. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.